All right. What is going on, everybody? This is Aaron from Missio Discipleship. Welcome to the Missio Discipleship podcast. Well, today, guys, what we want to do is I want to kind of move on ahead. If you haven't caught up with our last session, that was our big recap. So I'm just going to move on ahead so that we can kind of get through some of the nitty-gritty details, because now we're descending even further. We've come from 30,000 feet down to about 10,000 feet. 30,000 feet being the overall context, 10,000 feet being the thoughts that happen within the chapter breakups and the passage breakups. And now today we want to come down to the words. All right, so we really get into kind of nitty-gritty detail stuff when you're kind of looking at words. And so today I'm just going to kind of give you a fair overview of what are you looking out for when it does come down to the word level, and how do we kind of get the most out of this study. Before I do that, what I want to do is I want to illustrate this whole thing that we're doing called Bible study. I want to illustrate this whole thing. Okay, I love illustrations because image association is so powerful for us, right? And one of the ways that I often teach Bible study, I've got a few that are kind of graphic in terms of image recall and that. But the first way that I ever came up with it was called a CIA, right? CIA. And that was actually an acronym for Bible study. C is compile, I is investigate, A is apply, right? You want to do it in that order. But I want you to think about you are a CIA agent. Okay, I want you to think about CSI. I want you to think about Castle. I want you to think about what's the other one? Like 24, CSU. All of those kind of shows that we all binge watch on Netflix. I want you to think about that. I want you to put your feet into their shoes for a little bit, and you are a CSI agent. Okay, or a CIA agent. Now, what's the first thing that happens usually on those episodes? Okay, they get this crime case, and then they go to the scene. Now, when they're at the scene, what they do is, the last thing that they do is they come up with the conclusion on the first time that they're at the scene, which is funny because that's what we tend to do when we go to do Bible study, right? Is we kind of like go to a text, and then the first thing that we want to do is apply it, right? Well, I think you're jumping ahead if you're going to do that. No. So what they do is they go to a scene, and they investigate the area, all right? And so they come in, and their first job, and you'll see it all the time, is they start marking out things that are in the scene that kind of stand out to them. Right, and you'll see those little numbers around. You'll see they kind of, if there's a body, somebody might draw. I don't know if this is actually real or we just saw this in cartoons or whatever. But they used to draw a line around the body to see where the body was in relation to blood splatters and all that kind of stuff. They'll look for kind of the details in the in the crime scene. And so they're looking for like fibers and kind of like, rustled up bed or kind of blood splatters, guns, weapons. They're kind of looking at anything that might lead to kind of clues of who was here and why did it happen. So that's their first thing. What they do is they go in and they compile evidence. Okay, they just mark it out, and they do not try to interpret that evidence while they're there. And they definitely do not come to a conclusion. So they go from this crime scene, and they come back to the office. And I used to watch Castle. I used to binge watch Castle, and I used to love it. They would have this kind of board back at the office where they'd throw all of their information up, and they'll determine, hey guys, do we have enough? Do we have enough to really start investigating this? If they didn't, they'd go back. They'll look for more. They'll start doing some interviewing, all that kind of stuff. So they'll throw up all this information, and then they'll start kind of compiling a timeline. And once they've got a working timeline, they'll start to determine, okay, who do we need to ask questions of? Are there other victims? Who are kind of suspects? All of that kind of stuff, right? So that's the interpretation phase for them. That's when they really start to investigate the crime scene, and that might take, a significant time. Once they've done that, though, now they can take action and actually apply what they've learned to a person or whatever, and then they can convict them of a crime. Now, notice that a CIA agent has a process. Right, the process is very similar. They go through similar structures every single time, and it should be the same for our Bible study as well. We need to have these structures in play. So we have to do three things. We have to compile all of the evidence that we see in the text. Okay, and it's cool because usually this is the process of observation, but you can just boil that down to a letter C. You've got to see what's in the text, guys. You have to see what's in there, what's in there and what's not in there. Then you have to investigate your findings, and then from what you've investigated, that's what you apply. Cool? So we come down to the next thing. This is number 6 in our list of what to do when it comes to Bible study. How do we study the Bible? Okay, number 6. We're descending now down to about 100 feet and below. Okay, we're almost about to land the plane. This is where things get really super interesting, but again, none of it would make sense unless you've done the kind of overarching work at the top level. Excuse my car, I'm just backing up. All right, so we're looking at words here. We're going to spend about 10 minutes on words, and I can't give you everything. I am just driving, just pulled up. Okay, so here it is. Words. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you want to do when it comes to the word layer. And for me, all of this all happens all at once. It's a skill that you develop. When you're starting out, you kind of just want to start very, very slowly, and I don't expect the words to just pop out on the page. But what you want to do is when you start looking at words, what you are doing is you're looking at literary context. Okay, so here's a few things that you want to look out for. You want to look out for keywords. What are the words that really stand out, that carry the weight of the text and the weight of the thought? So, for example, a word that stands out in, let's say, Ephesians chapter 2 is grace and faith, right? Grace and mercy, faith, love, all of these are nouns that really pop out, and they carry a lot of the meaning. Cool. And the way that you discover these key words is you look for things like, are they the main subject that's being talked about? Are they the main subject that's being talked about? Are they repeated? Because repetition is the author trying to drive it home down deep into our hearts that this is his main thought. Okay, so that's the next thing. Are they repeated words? So number 1 is do they carry the main subject? Number 2 is, are they repeated? Are they modified by an adjective or an adverb? Is there extra descriptions around them? And then usually there are other things as well. What is the action that he wants us to look for? And so what I usually look for is, if I'm going into a passage, I'm looking just for the weightiest words. Okay, that's the best way I can illustrate it for beginners, is the words that carry the subject and carry the flow of thought. So that's the first thing, and then the second thing is the repetition. Am I seeing it repeated often? Because usually that's the author trying to drive that thought home. So in Ephesians 1, for example, Ephesians 1, Ephesians 2, love is repeated often, grace is repeated often, mercy is repeated often. And those are things that I want to be looking at. And just like when you're reading, you want to just document all of this down. Okay, just like a CIA agent, he would go in and he would mark out where these are. It's cool to have different pens and stuff like that. If you're highlighting, I like eSword because you can kind of highlight words in different shades and different colors. and kind of see how it all kind of makes sense. All right, so what I just want to do is I want to just give you a basic rundown of what I would be looking at if I was to really break this down from a grammatical point of view. So again, I'm not super great at English, so I might even get some of these wrong. But here's the thing, I do this so often that a lot of these just kind of point themselves out to me, like they stand out as soon as I go to a text. All right, and I've got to a point where I can just go to a text now, and that will start speaking to me straight away. Okay, and that's the thing, is you just got to time in the word and knowing what you're looking out for. Over time, it'll just pop out in front of you. Okay, because your mind will be pre-programmed as to what to look for, and that's super cool and super exciting. So here's what we're going to be looking for in the text. Number one, we're going to be looking for nouns. Okay, nouns carry the subject. They're kind of what is being talked about. All right, so for example, we used grace, love, mercy. Usually it's a name, place, or a thing. So Jesus Christ, Paul, the saints, those are all nouns, right? And then you've got verbs. Verbs carry the object, or what do you want to do with the subject, right? And so what you're looking for is action. So I want to be asking the question, who is it talking about? What is it talking about? That's your nouns. And then I want to be talking about how am I doing that, or how is that noun doing that? All right. Now that's your action. Those are your verbs. And so you'll see stuff like run. You know, Hebrews 12 talks about run the race with endurance, right? You'll be looking at words like, and it'll usually be like a full-on clause, like you need to do this, you know, you need to love your brothers with brotherly affection. What else can we do? Put on the armor of God. You know, these are all kind of verbs. They're actions. You need to love as Christ has loved you. You need to forgive as Christ has forgiven us. Ephesians chapter 4. Yeah. All right, so you got nouns and you've got verbs. The next thing you got is adjectives and adverbs. Adjectives, they describe the noun and they further modify the noun. Adverbs, they describe the verbs and modify the verbs. So, for example, if it's run, well, how did he run? Hastily, quickly, you know, was he swift? All of that kind of stuff. So whenever you have a modifier of a verb, or it kind of describes what's happening with the action, that's your adverb. So I look at all of those things. I'll give you a practical tip for Ephesians. One practical tip for Ephesians is look at prepositions. Okay, prepositions are super important. They kind of tell you where that thing is associated. All right, so the best illustration for a preposition is if you had a box. All right, if you had a box, what's the orientation of where that subject is around the box? So is it around? Right, that's a preposition. Is it in? Preposition. Outside of? That's a preposition. Up, left, bottom, top, superior, posterior. All these, now the Bible's not going to say superior, posterior, but all of these are prepositions. Now, when it comes to Ephesians, one of the prepositions that stands out, and it's like everywhere throughout, it says in, and then it gives us a noun. In Christ. In Christ. Right? In Christ. And the thing is what Paul is trying to drive home in Ephesians is the fact of the matter is that if you're just you, in your sin, you're dead. You're dead in trespasses and sin. However, you're forgiven in Jesus Christ. You have grace in Jesus Christ. You have salvation in Jesus Christ. Outside of Jesus and in the flesh, you are by nature children of wrath. So, do you see how the word in, the preposition in, really changes it? And so the question begs is, who are you in? Are you in the flesh? Or what are you in? Are you in the flesh or are you in Jesus Christ? And then the next question off of that is naturally would be, how do I get into Jesus Christ? How do I get into the family of God? And he further explains that a little bit later in chapter 2, and he says, by faith, by grace through faith, right? You're saved by grace through faith. And so looking at prepositions is super important. Now, another thing that I really, really look out for is, and I know my time is pushing here, so I'll finish up with this last one, is conjunctions. Conjunctions, okay? Conjunctions are connecting words. And so whenever you see but, if, therefore, wherefore, depends what version you're reading, usually a but, if, and a therefore, and all of those words there, those are connecting words, and what they do is they tie thoughts together. Now, there is a very, very common adage that's used when it comes to Bible study, especially around the use of conjunctions, and it's this, and I want you to remember this. It says therefore. Whenever you see the word therefore, look at why it's there for, right? Or look at what it's there for. So whenever you see therefore, look at what it's there for. The example that I want to give to you is Romans chapter 12. Therefore, right? Romans chapter 12. Therefore, that's how he starts. Now, if you know anything about Romans chapter 12, he's going to tell you to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, right? Don't be conformed into the image of the world, but rather present your bodies as a living sacrifice. Now, the thing is he begins that statement, therefore. Okay, now if he begins with that, therefore, you got to understand, why is it therefore? What is it there for? All right? Now, if you know anything about Romans, you understand that Paul has just been developing this argument from chapter 1. And so from chapter 1 through to chapter 11, we've got this big argument for the unrighteousness of man, the righteousness of Jesus, and righteousness by faith alone, not by works. And that's what he's been doing for 11 chapters. Now, he transitions his thought to application. And so he starts kind of moving from an argument to, and he changes his argument slightly, that if you are in the faith, this is what it would look like practically. And he starts with this idea of worship. Therefore, on the basis and predicated on everything that I've talked about already, therefore, present your bodies as a living sacrifice. You see? So conjunctions are super important. Same thing is in Hebrews chapter 12. And this is therefore, and then he starts to talk about the race that we would be running, and laying aside every weight and sin that does so easily beset us. And he says therefore, he begins that with therefore, right? What he's trying to do is connect chapters 11 to chapter 12. So if you know nothing about chapter 11, you will not understand chapter 12 fully. So conjunctions serve as connectors for us. They're super helpful. All right, well, that's a few things that I look for in the text. They stand out. There's a lot more, but we will leave it there, and I'm going to talk to you next time about another layer on top of that when it comes to literary context and some things that we can observe that can really give us some good kind of movement in terms of our Bible study. All right, team, you guys have a great day. We will catch you soon.